So as you can see here on the DXY, the order flow is bearish, so we could still trade down lower. So my name is Oscar Madsen, I'm a funded trader as well as a personal coach, and with these weekly outlooks I look for next week to see if we can catch some trades. So as you can see here on the DXY, let's start off with the weekly time frame. We are bullish, so in the end we should trade up higher, which I'm also looking for to trade up higher in the near future. But at what point are we going to trade up higher? So first of all, we took liquidity underneath this low, we got a reaction up higher, and then we swiped all of these early buyers and we even grabbed some more liquidity. Now the only thing is that we have a refined demand zone, so we could see one more tap into our Z before moving up higher. Going over to the daily time frame, what do I also see? We do have an open demand zone over here, which I'm also looking for, where we could trade towards if the order flow stays bearish. And then from this point I will look for longs. So on the 4 hour it's going to be exactly the same. I'm still looking at downside on the dollar until we flip the order flow, which is going to be this high. Then we could start to look for longs. If we now break the low, then this will become your order flow high. Then we want to break that, and then we can look for those longs. So I want to look for longs next week, but I need to see that order flow switch bullish, and then I could look for potential dollar longs. Going over to Euro USD on the weekly time frame, going to be the same as the dollar, but as you can see we have an open supply zone here on Euro USD on a weekly time frame with some liquidity underneath that supply zone. So we could still trade up higher in towards the supply before trading down lower. So that's something that I'm keeping in mind at the moment. And for the rest, we do not really have any other point of interest where I could see a reaction down lower from. So I will need to wait on the lower time frame to see if we could already trade down lower a little bit. So on the daily time frame, what can we see? Well, we are daily bullish. So now that we just flip bullish, we could see a retracement in towards the discount prices, with this being the swing low, this being the swing high, and I want to retrace towards the 50% level before moving up higher possibly. So I'm still looking at shorts here, and that's going to be for the 4 hour. So what I'm going to be doing is again wait for that order flow switch. So at the moment we know this demand is still in control, and what do we often see? Well, we see the high gets swiped, we get early sellers in towards the market, and then what you then often see is that you swipe those early sellers, then you switch the order flow, and then you can trade down lower. So either I'm waiting for this, or I want to see the order flow switch bearish, and then I wanted to look for shorts, but as you can see we then already tapped discount prices, so that's not good anymore, because once you tap those discount prices then you want to look for longs. So either we swipe the high one more time, we break the order flow bearish, then we take shorts, or we swipe all of these lows, then we break to the upside, creating some demand zones, and then we could look for longs. So that's for me what I'm looking for Euro USD. Keep in mind that we do have some trendline liquidity underneath all of these lows, so don't just randomly buy if we take some liquidity over here. Always wait for confirmation. Going over to GBP USD on the weekly time frame, again you can see some liquidity points or highs are open, so we could possibly trade towards that before getting any reaction down lower. At the moment this demand on the weekly time frame is also in control and is actually pushing price back up higher. We are currently inside this imbalance candle here on the weekly time frame, which could push price down lower one more time to swipe all of these buyers over here, boom, boom, and then boom. So that's also what I'm looking for, because I want to see a reaction from this supply zone, because this supply zone broke structure, right? So that's what I'm looking for. Going over to the daily time frame, exactly. So we now also have a wedge forming over here, so we have 1, 2, and a third tap. So now we could see one more swipe, swiping all of the liquidity, trade in towards the discount prices over here because we are bullish. then we want to see a retracement, and then we want to trade up higher. So if I'm shorting any pair, Euro USD or GBP USD, I'm definitely going to be GBP USD because it's more in line with the trend and along with the discount prices. So then I want to see my confirmation on the 4 hour, and I can see that we already have the confirmation. So we swiped high one more time, and then what can you see? We had a demand zone in control, but that quickly with this candle became a supply zone because now you have a buy before the sell. This is your supply zone where you now want to look to short from to take all of the liquidity underneath the lows, possibly trade towards this open demand zone, and definitely tap in towards the discount prices. So at the moment I'm looking for shorts here on GBP USD, and I think that this supply could push price down lower. So I'm actually already going over to the 1 hour to see if we can find some possible entries, because I think that this is already looking valid. So on the 1 hour, what can I see? This is for me the early sellers. So we tap into the supply, then we see early sellers. I want to see a swipe of those early sellers, then break the order flow down lower, and then I want to see shorts. So this is what I'm waiting for next week, to take shorts on GBP USD. And if we just trade down lower, if you take an entry or not, once we take liquidity and need these lows, maybe tap this demand zone, and if we then see the fractal break to the upside, then I'm going to look for longs again on GBP USD. Going over to NZD USD, I was looking for longs all the way up until this supply, but with all the wars going on, what could this mean? Well, risk off and risk on, which could mean that NZD, AUD, and CAD also could trade down lower. So yeah, with this in mind, we just grabbed weekly liquidity. So this could already cause us to trade down lower here on NZD USD. And what can we also see? Well, we kind of have some trend line liquidity. We now have this as our daily fractal low over here. Where is it? So if we break the daily fractal low, then we create supply, and then we could trade down lower to take out all of the liquidity. As long as we respect that low, then we could still trade up higher for me towards that weekly supply, which I mentioned on the weekly time frame. But like I said, for now we could trade up higher. That depends on the 4 hour, what we are doing over there. But once we break that daily fractal over here, then I want to look for shorts to trade until this low. Why? Because my trend over here is like this and then up higher. So then what do we see? Well, from the swing low all the way up until the swing high, then you can see that we still can make a retracement, grab liquidity coming towards those discount prices, and then we could trade up higher in towards that higher time frame supply zone. Going over to the 4 hour, then either I'm going to wait for one more swipe, swiping all of the highs, grabbing that weekly liquidity, and this arrow is for me the higher time frame supply. So once we tap those point of interest, then I'm going to look for shorts here next week, or if we see that we break that daily fractal, then I want to look for the shorts already trading down lower to take all of the liquidity out over here. So that's definitely what I'm looking for NZD USD, definitely looking nice. And I'm not looking at the 4 hour swing structure, because for me the higher time frame is more important than the 4 hour swing. Going over to AUD USD on the weekly time frame, what can I see? Well, on the weekly time frame, we just tapped the premium prices. As you can see, we traded down lower from the swing high until the swing low. Now we got a pullback in towards those premium prices, and now we could trade down lower again. Now keep in mind, we still have some more liquidity open over here, which we could definitely take out before moving down lower. So that's definitely something that I'm keeping in mind before taking any short setups. And as you can see, we also have an open supply zone as well. So that's definitely looking to get tapped before shorting. Now, what can we see? Well, we broke the daily fractal already on AUD and USD. So that could mean that this is your supply zone over here in control, and this of course could push price then again down lower in towards all of these low. So as you see on NZD USD and AUD USD with all of these lows, in the near future I'm looking for this to get taken out, but I'm going to be patient. Either we swipe the highs just the same as NZD USD before moving down lower, or we already trade down lower. Now, because we have an open supply and we have open liquidity, I'm not already going to go short because of a one daily fractal, because we could still trade up higher and then trade down lower. So I want to see another daily fractal at least before taking any shorts setups, just to be sure of my short setup. So on the 4-hour time frame, this 4-hour swing high is still your swing high, and this is still your current swing. So we already made a pullback in towards discount prices, and now we should trade up higher in towards that swing high. Why is this not a break? Because this is just with a wick and not a candle close. So for me, we could still trade up higher, which perfectly aligns with that higher time frame supply and liquidity. So that's why I'm also not taking any shorts. But if we see like multiple swipes in towards the downside, then yes, we could already trade down lower. But keep in mind that we have that open supply zone. So I would rather see a swipe and then short, because that's just high probability, and I like to take my highest probability setups. Going over to Euro AUD, I'm definitely looking for upside here. Why? Because I'm looking for downside on AUD and NZD based on risk on and risk off, which is a fundamental sentiment. So as you will see over here, we actually are bullish on the weekly time frame. We tapped the discount prices perfectly over here, so we could start to trade up higher, of course. Also, this demand over here pushed price back up higher. So going over to the daily time frame, we are bullish. We tapped discount prices over here perfectly, and then we reacted up higher. Now you can see that we have bullish order flow with all these demands being in control, and this one is now ultimately in control. So once we tap in towards that daily demand, I want to start looking for longs to take some liquidity at the highs, and eventually, of course, trade until this swing high over here. So on the 4-hour time frame, I'm of course waiting for the same. So I do see that we have some liquidity that we could grab on the upside. So from this demand zone over here, I'm looking to go long, like I said, on the daily. I can also see that we made some liquidity laying above that supply demand. So if we see that liquidity and a demand get tapped, I'm just going to wait for my order flow switch or my fractal break, and then I want to take those long setups until those highs. Going over to GBP AUD on the weekly time frame, what are we seeing? Well, we grabbed a lot of liquidity above this high, so that could mean that we swipe liquidity at the low, so that could definitely happen before moving up higher. Keeping an eye on that, but at the moment you can clearly see that on the daily time frame we are bullish. We also came in towards those discount prices, and you can also see that we are currently respecting the lows and again like breaking the highs every single time. So that could mean that we have bullish order flow and that we could just trade up higher and maybe grab this liquidity, for example, before moving down lower, and grab some weekly liquidity like we said on the weekly time frame, and then moving up higher. But at the moment I'm seeing bullish order flow. We are bullish, we are in discount prices, we have a demand zone, so I'm looking for those longs until that liquidity, and from there I'm going to be careful, because then we could see a retracement before moving up higher. On the 4-hour time frame, let's see. So yeah, again, order flow is bullish, and this is definitely my liquidity point where I want to trade towards for next week. So that's my target for next week also. So at the moment you can see the order flow is bullish with this demand being in control. Now what I'm looking for is just break the high, get this demand to be created, and then just continue to trade up higher. So I'm just looking for higher prices. Let's say in the beginning of the week we swipe this liquidity, then you would want this high to be broken before moving any up, like taking any longs, because you would want your order flow to be bullish. So also keep in mind that we have a refined demand zone over here, so that's definitely something to take a look at. if we come closer to this demand. At the moment you can still look for those longs over here, but once we swipe this low, we're already closer to this demand, so we could also just fall down lower, then get your fractal break, and then this is your long setup. So I'm looking for those longs. Either if we grab liquidity, then we could also see something like this, take a long over here, or we could just see something like this, take longs like this, or a full swipe of the lows, then your fractal, and then you can take those longs. But definitely for next week, I'm targeting these highs. Going over to Euro NZD on the weekly time frame, you can see we clearly grab liquidity above this high, a clear liquidity swipe, and now what I'm expecting is of course the same as Euro 80 for this weekly liquidity to get taken out. Now that doesn't mean that we could take liquidity at the highs before moving down lower, so I'm going to look at the lower time frame if we're already going to trade down lower, or if we could just trade up higher a bit before moving down lower. Going over to the daily time frame, then let's see. So we are bullish. I can see that we still have some more liquidity highs over here and an open supply zone. So definitely at the moment I'm still looking for longs. This is going to be my order flow or demand zone in control, which is going to be pushing price up higher for me. So I'm definitely looking for those longs at the moment to take liquidity above these highs and trade towards the supply, and from here trade down lower, take liquidity, and then you could then again trade up higher. So on the 4 hour, you can also see that the order flow is not bearish, but we are inside a supply zone. So that's definitely something to take a look at, because we are inside this supply. We built a lot of liquidity above under this supply zone, so now we could see a reaction down lower. That's also exactly what I'm expecting. So because we are inside this supply, I do expect a reaction to take liquidity underneath the lows, then get the confirmation into the upside, creating a demand zone, and then I would want to take longs until those daily liquidity highs, which I explained. So that's my goal here for next week. So yeah, definitely looking for that. You can also see in this move up higher, I could also want to see a retracement towards that liquidity that we already explained, but also possibly the discount prices, and of course would like to see a tap in towards this demand before looking for those A plus longs. But at the moment we'll need to see how we react from this liquidity, and if we already give some reaction, then you could already take a long setups. Going over to GBP NZD on the weekly time frame, so you can see, guys, clear bullish order flow for me, just always longs here on a GBP NZD, just until these liquidity highs where we could see a small reaction and then possibly trade up higher. But in the end, I'm always looking for this high to get taken out because we have such a bullish order flow. So you can also see we tapped this demand now, and yeah, we do have this supply which is also in control, so you need to keep that in mind as well, right? But over here we grab liquidity underneath this low, we tap that little demand zone over here, and now we could trade up higher. We do see, and that's more visible on the daily time frame, that let's remove this, that from this move down lower we tapped the premium prices, and then you could already see price trading down lower with that weekly supply which we are currently trading in. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But at the moment here on the daily time frame, we are bullish, we tapped demand, and we do have bullish order flow. So this demand is now in control, and I'm also now looking for further longs. On the 4 hour time frame, yes, we are bearish, and here it is more clear. We tapped those premium prices, and as you can see, we also got a reaction down lower. But you can also see that the order flow is currently also bullish, and that I would want to trade towards those liquidity highs. So this demand over here is in control, but I can see that we have some more liquidity as well as this high over here. So we have multiple highs open, and that plus the order flow that's being bullish, we could start to look for longs immediately. So at the moment I would need to see a swipe above this high for this demand to be created, then a swipe like this, and then I could look for longs here on the 1 hour, just like a 1 hour character change or fractal break, and then we can trade up higher. until those liquidity highs. So we need to be careful because we are inside weekly supply and we are bearish and we tap supply. So definitely not an A plus setup here to look for longs, and I think that GBP AUD is better. But for example, if you grab liquidity over here, or if you want to take longs, I would target that liquidity, because from that liquidity you could then trade down lower or you could continue up higher. But what are you sure of? Well, this move up higher. So I'm going to look for that. That's going to be more on the lower time frame because it's such a small move, but that's what I'm waiting for. Something like this, a little retracement, then a little fractal break on the lower time frame, and then I would want to take a long until this liquidity, because from here we could trade down lower in line with the trend and the supply, or we could trade up higher and take liquidity and then trade down lower in line with the trend and the supply. Going over to AUD NZD, I took a loss here and also made a breakdown on that, so you can learn from that, but I'm still looking for those longs next week. So what am I exactly looking for? As you guys know, I have bullish order flow, or we have bullish order flow over here. We are also bullish, so we would like to trade up higher, and we have some liquidity above the highs. So that's definitely something to take a look at in the near future to trade towards those highs for me. So on the daily time frame, you can also see that we grabbed a lot of liquidity underneath the lows, and then once we swiped out the lows, we took those long setups towards this liquidity high. We got a retracement, grabbed more liquidity underneath the low, and now I'm looking for upside again on AUD NZD. So on the 4 hour, we're also 4 hour bullish. We took liquidity underneath this low. I am quickly going to check if this is still open, and as you can see, this is still open, but we do also have this little demand zone over here where we also tapped in towards. So I'm not going to consider that too much, that we still have this little demand zone open, because we also already tapped in towards this demand zone. So then you can see that we are currently trading in towards this demand, and then we broke towards the upside. So then this demand now is in control. So let's make that a bit more clear, like this. So what did we see? We kind of broke the highs and we're kind of consolidating. We then swiped all of the lows over here, swept liquidity, and now we broke the fractal low and then the fractal high, creating demand over here, which could push price back up higher. So what I'm looking for next week is longs, longs, longs. So the best thing that you could do over here is wait for this high to break, then you could look for longs. If you are patient, you could do that. If you want to be sure that we are not again going to swipe the low before moving up higher, or if you want to be a little more aggressive but you already have your confirmation, so it's not too aggressive, but if you want to take it just a bit faster and think it's already valid to take, then I would like to say grab liquidity underneath this low in the beginning of the week, get your fractal confirmation, and then you could trade up higher when this demand is formed. And then this is where you take your long setup. And then of course, where is your target going to be? I would say this high, but eventually you could take the highs, all of these highs out. But yeah, this is definitely going to get taken out in my opinion, or at least that's what I'm analyzing in the near future, trading up higher. Looking at USD Swiss here on the weekly time frame, we are bearish, and as you can see, we should trade up higher in towards the premium prices because we just turned bearish. Now at the moment, I could see this low get swiped one more time before moving up higher, because this supply now on the weekly time frame is in control, which could push price down lower, swiping the low one more time and then trading up higher. Now also, what do we also see, which is possible to already trade up higher? Well, a double fractal break and then a liquidity grab, and then we often see that reversal happen. So what am I going to do? Wait on the lower time frame to see if we can already start to look for those longs, or if we're going to swipe the low one more time before taking any long setups. Going over to the daily time frame, my analysis is going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to go over to the 4 hour and see what's up. So on the 4 hour here. This is also perfect example for the guys that do want to know and are watching this at this moment. So I get a lot of questions about the swing structure, like why is this not my swing structure? Well, because inside this swing you see internal structure, and if I draw down the internal structure like this, then you can see that this move is exactly as big as the internal structure that we had before. So that's when I see this also as my internal structure. Now, okay, let's go over to the weekly outlook. So we are bearish, but we know that when we are bearish, we could expect a move until the premium prices. So at the moment, what did we do? We grabbed liquidity underneath this low and we could start to trade up higher. So we grab liquidity underneath the low, and then what do you also see? Well, we broke the 4-hour fractal in towards the upside, which is normally a confirmation that you could trade up higher, because now you have a demand zone being in control that could push price back up higher. So we could then again trade up higher. I do see that we have some liquidity open over here and a supply zone, so definitely nice to look for those longs. Now what I would do is definitely wait for a second fractal break before taking any longs, and also keep in mind that this supply is in control, right? So if you see that second swipe, second fractal break, could also be that you then trade down lower because of this supply. So definitely keep that in mind. So if you want to take any long setups, I would advise taking a small long setup on the lower time frame so that you can be quick out of the trade. Because yes, we took liquidity, yes, we could trade towards those premium prices, yes, there's liquidity open, so it's already valid, right, to trade up higher, because you also got your fractal break. But I would like to be careful to just take a small long, for example, on the lower time frame on Monday morning, for example, trading towards this supply, and maybe you can even trade towards over here. But once we tap that supply, I would set my trade on break even, for example, or do anything. But yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, if we are fundamentally going to be bullish here, which at the moment is definitely not going to be, but once we start switching up and the Swiss franc is going to be bearish, for example, then we could start to look to trade all the way up towards these highs, for example, once we switch the order flow like this. But that's not going to be for next week. For next week, I'm only eyeing for longs. So if we do not see some highs getting broken and we could trade up higher, then I would like to see the low being broken before taking any long setups. Going over to Euro Swiss, well, on every single Swiss pair I'm long, but fundamentally at the moment, because of the war in Iran and yeah, just all around the world, I'm just not sure if the Swiss franc at the moment is going to be bearish, because it's a safe haven and it should push up higher. But I think maybe in a couple of weeks this could fundamentally turn bullish again. So I'm not going to be trading the Swiss franc next week, but on all Swiss pairs they all did the same, and I'm going to show you technically. They all grabbed liquidity at the lows. I'm going to show it quickly. Euro Swiss took liquidity at the lows. GBP Swiss took liquidity at the lows. AUD Swiss took liquidity at the lows. NZD Swiss took liquidity at the lows. CAD Swiss also. So what I'm going to be doing here is only stick to the 4-hour here, and going to show you that I'm only looking for longs. Why? If you swipe liquidity at the lows, I'm just looking to continue up higher. So on every single Swiss pair, I'm looking to take long setups. That's just what I wanted to say, and now we can analyze and see how we can possibly look for those longs. But keep in mind, it could be tricky with the wars that have been happening. So this is definitely my liquidity point to trade towards, and we also have an open supply. So that's my target in the ultimate, like next weeks. But we can also see we grabbed a lot of liquidity and need the lows, so this could give us a V-shaped reaction to trade up higher. Now at the moment, this supply is still going to be in control. So what I would like to see, of course, is that high to get taken out, then a little retracement, and then over here, that's where I look for those long setups. So that's also what I'm waiting for here on Euro Swiss. Going over to GBP Swiss, well, what am I looking for? I was like I said, on all Swiss pairs, I'm looking for longs in the long term once they switch fundamentally bullish again, like they were all the way over here. But at the moment, you could look for possible short setups because of the wars that has been going on. So we have liquidity that is open at the moment. We do have an open demand zone, which is also visible on the daily time frame, I think. Yes, exactly. This demand is still open. So definitely something to trade towards. And then from here, I'm definitely going to look for longs again. So that's what I'm waiting for here on GBP Swiss. So once we trade up higher, grab liquidity, tap in towards the supply, we could see a little confirmation, a fractal break, and we could take a small short setup in towards those lows. Now, once we are over here, I'm only going to look for longs. And once we start to break the highs over here, I'm also going to look for further longs, because then we switch order flow bullish again, and we could also start to look for those longs. Now, as long as we see a reaction from the supply and premium prices, then we could trade in line with the trend, trading down lower towards this liquidity. But from here, I'm going to look for longs, or once we swipe the high, I'm going to look for longs on these GBP Swiss pair. So on AUD Swiss, what do we see here on the 4 hour? Well, on the 4 hour, we're bullish. We took liquidity. We just tapped discount prices. And again, why is this not my swing? Because it's as big as the internal over here. So this is just all internal for me. And the current swing is this. So we are bullish. We tap discount prices. We grab liquidity. We are inside this demand. So this is definitely looking nice to trade up higher. At the moment, what do we see? Well, this current supply zone is in control. So either we wait for this high to get taken out, which is going to take a long time, but sometimes we gotta be patient, wait for a retracement, and then take longs over here. So what are you going to be waiting for over here? A 4 hour character or change of character or fractal break, whatever you want to call it, and then you can trade up higher again towards those highs. Now, what could also happen is that we are inside the supply, we trade down lower, swipe the low, creating this supply, and then you could see this, for example, swiping the high, and then what could this mean? Creating demand to then trading up higher. So ultimately, I would like to see my order flow switch bullish, and then I could take again longs. Am I going to take shorts? No, because we're bullish, we are inside discount prices, and we grab liquidity underneath the lows. On NZD Swiss here, we just turned swing bearish, but this could also be definitely a liquidity grab underneath the lows to then trade up higher. So definitely going to keep that in mind. And what do we know? Well, at the moment, what do we see? What is our internal structure? Down lower, then up higher, and then down lower. So this is going to be my internal supply zone. And as you can see, we also get a reaction from that. So I would like to see one more swipe of the low. Then I want my order flow to be bullish, and then we could start to look for longs, even though it's counter trend. So I would highly advise going then to AUD Swiss, because that's a bit better then. But still, I'm looking for longs because we grab liquidity underneath the lows, and ultimately on the higher time frame, we grabbed a lot of liquidity underneath the lows, like I said on the weekly, and we could try to trade towards these liquidity highs. So even though we are bearish, I know my higher time frame wants to trade towards this liquidity, so I don't care that we are swing bearish on the lower time frame, which is at the moment 4 hour. So 4 hour against the weekly is definitely lower time frame, right? So on the weekly, the higher time frame, I want to look for longs. So if the order flow, either if we break this high, that's going to flip the order flow bullish, or if we swipe the low, then this is going to be our high, and then like this. So if we just switch the order flow bullish, then I can look for longs here on NZD Swiss. At the moment, I'm just going to be patient and not doing anything. Going over to CAD Swiss, again, you can see a perfect liquidity swipe underneath this low. And then what do we see? Well, we do not yet break the fractal high. So this is your fractal high. This is also going to be your order flow as well. So if you break this order flow or fractal high, you create a demand zone and you could start to look for longs. Now keep in mind, so like I said, Canadian dollar should weaken with the overall sentiment of the war, but oil is also going to rally up higher because of the war. And if oil rallies up higher, then Canadian dollar is in line with that and will also rally up higher. So keep that in mind. So I think that we could just now look for those longs in line with the oil prices that should also trade up higher. As you can see here, US oil with the reaction of the news, a huge spike in towards the highs, but I think that we could just still trade up higher. Like looking on the daily, yes, we took all of this liquidity at these highs, so quite tricky. Now this amount is in control, so we could definitely trade up higher. And what do you see, guys? All of the liquidity highs over here. So if the war stays crazy, we could see an ultimate swipe here on oil, swiping all of these highs. So keep that in mind. So that could also mean that CAD Swiss could also trade up higher, even though that CAD should be bearish when there is a war. So going over to USD CAD, what do we see? Well, we tap this demand zone here, and yeah, even though that we are bearish, we should look for longs. Why? Because on the weekly time frame over here, we grab liquidity near the low, we tap this weekly refined demand, so I'm definitely looking to trade up higher in towards either this supply and eventually this higher time frame supply. On the daily, we're also bullish. We grab liquidity, we trade it in towards this demand, and as you can see, we traded up higher, and now we trade down lower in towards discount prices, so we could trade up higher again. We have a supply open over here, and we have some liquidity in the need, so that's going to be my point where I want to trade towards. On the 4-hour time frame, what do I see? Well, we have some liquidity above the highs, so definitely something to look to trade towards. Then ultimately, I of course want to target this. So once we switch that order flow bullish, because as you can see, order flow is clearly bearish. So we had this supply and then this supply being in control at the moment. So if we swipe the high, switch order flow bullish, you could then look for longs to first trade towards this liquidity and eventually trade towards those highs. You would want your dollar to be bullish and your CAD to be bearish, which is also in line with the fundamentals if the oil prices are not going to trade up higher, because then the CAD should be strong and we could trade down lower here on USD CAD. Going over to Euro CAD, I kind of have mixed biases. Like I said, previous weekly outlooks, Euro CAD at the moment is not my favorite. So we took liquidity above the highs, so we could trade down lower and take liquidity at the lows. But we still have some more liquidity above the highs, so we could see one more swipe before moving down lower. Going over to the daily time frame, what do we see? Well, I can see that we also have some kind of support and resistance over here. We get a reaction, we also get a reaction over here, and then a third time we get also a reaction. So this could mean that for me, we trade down lower and take all of the liquidity underneath the lows, trade towards discount prices and this open demand. Now, the thing is, I'm not a head and shoulders or pattern trader, but what do I see? A clear head and shoulder pattern where we could also trade down lower. So that's just something that I'm keeping in mind when trading, because I trade logic and I see that this is a strong level. I do not trade support and resistance also, but I just see this is a strong level. So what could this mean? We could see a drop down lower, right? So on the 4-hour, that's also something to keep in mind, but we are bullish and we also have bullish order flow, right? So we could still look for those longs until those swing highs and that liquidity on the higher time frame, that weekly liquidity. But that's not what I'm going to do, because we could trade down lower, like I said, to take all of the liquidity at the lows. So what is something that you can do? Well, what do I see over here? We grab liquidity above this high and then we trade down lower. So we have created a supply zone over here on the 4-hour time frame where we could trade down lower from and break the order flow and then take short setups. So once we switch the order flow bearish, we could look for shorts, but at the moment longs are still valid because you're 4-hour bullish and you have 4-hour bullish order flow. But if you look at the 1 hour, you can see that we have an open 1 hour zone over here with some liquidity underneath. So what I would do is go over to the 50-minute, and of course you need to be careful what price will do because of oil, because normally CAD should be weak and then we could trade up higher here with Euro CAD, but if the oil price has a rally up higher, CAD is going to be strong and this pair will trade down lower as well. So what I would do, yeah, as you can see, it's consolidating, so you would like to see maybe one more swipe or something, but I would look for a 50-minute like long setup trading towards this liquidity, because that's what I like to do. We know this is our 4-hour supply, and we could take some liquidity and then we could either trade down lower all the way like we said from this supply zone, or what could also happen is that we just trade up higher. But the move that we ultimately know what's going to happen probably is this move up towards this liquidity, and then we could either trade down lower or up higher. So if we trade up higher or down lower, you still have your TP, and it's the power of the lower time frame, right? So if you would like to take a setup here on EuroCAD next week, keep in mind that we could trade up both ways, but you could take some small setups like this on the lower time frame, 50-minute, to take some liquidity above the highs before moving down lower, for example. So going over to GBP CAD, you can see the overflow is also bullish. Yeah, we took liquidity above this high, but at the moment it doesn't seem like we're slowing down. This demand zone is pushing price up higher and higher, so we could definitely trade up higher towards this liquidity high. So for me, I'm still longs here on GBP CAD in the long run. Now what do I see? We're bullish with the discount prices. The overflow on the demand is bullish, but we still have an open demand zone, so it could be that we see a swipe of the lows, boom, and then you trade up higher again, trading up higher to take out all of the liquidity highs. That's also exactly what I'm waiting for. So next week I'm just waiting for a swipe of this low, tapping towards this demand, and then trade up higher. So this is going to be around maybe midweek, not on Monday, not on Tuesday, maybe on Wednesday. We could take those long setups from this open demand after we swept all of the liquidity underneath the lows. And then of course you guys know the drill. Once we swipe liquidity, we would want to see an order flow switch, a demand zone to be created, and then we could look for longs over here to trade up higher back in towards that high and take liquidity above all these highs. So that's what I'm waiting for. Now what I want to show you is, if you switch the order flow bullish over here, are you going to look for longs? That could be, but I'm not going to. Why am I not going to? Because we have an open demand and there's no point of interest that could push price up higher. We all have weak lows because they're stacked up on each other, and that's just the reason why I'm not going to long, even though we're 4-hour, daily and weekly bullish order flow, daily bullish order flow, and then also 4-hour bullish order flow. If we switch the order flow, I'm still not looking for longs because that could be a fake out up until the up to the high, and then we could see a swiping all of the buyers and then trading up higher. So again, be patient, wait for your point of interest to get taken. So I'm just going to place this alert here on this liquidity over here. That's the only thing that I'm waiting for to get hit on this pair, this alert, and only then I'm looking back on this pair before taking any setup. Because I'm also not going to long if my higher time frame is bullish. I just want the higher time frame and the 4-hour to be aligned before taking any long setups. Going over to NZD CAD, you can clearly see that we're going for this liquidity, but let's start off with the weekly first. So on the weekly, we grab liquidity and need all of these lows. So I was looking to get all of the liquidity above the highs, which I think is definitely possible in the near future before moving down lower. But we do see that this supply is in control and is pushing price down lower. So we could also just continue down lower in line with the weekly trend. On the daily time frame, what am I seeing? Well, just consolidation, guys. This is just pure consolidation, but I'm looking for a low of the consolidation phase gets swiped, and then we could swipe the high of this consolidation phase, which is going to be this high, and eventually we could also trade up higher to take all of the liquidity above the highs. So once we swipe this liquidity, I'm going to wait for my 4-hour confirmation to take long setups until the highs. On the 4-hour, that's going to be more visible here. We are 4-hour bullish, so we should trade towards the 4-hour here. Am I going to look at this at the premium versus discount? You could, but you see this big move up higher, what is kind of affected with the Trump tariffs, so it doesn't necessarily need to retrace into the discount prices, because that's a big move, and we could just grab liquidity underneath the lows, switch your 4-hour fractal bullish, then you could start to look for those longs again to take a longs until those highs. And that's at least what I'm going to be doing next week, or at least wait for. I'm not going to look for any shorts on this pair. I'm just keeping it to longs, going to be patient until we can take a long setups. So am I going to look for longs if we take liquidity underneath this low? No, I'm not going to. I'm just waiting for this liquidity, and that's all. Always be patient, stick to the first thought and not change throughout the week. That's why these weekly analyses are great, because then you have your plan, you need to stick to it, and you're not going to be thinking emotionally when the market is active. So when we look at AUD CAD here on the weekly time frame, we took a lot of liquidity at the lows, so I'm definitely looking for at least this internal liquidity to get taken out, at least that liquidity. So I want to see some more upside here on AUD CAD to take out that liquidity before moving down lower. On the daily time frame, you can also see that we also have that liquidity open plus a supply zone. So yes, the supply or the order flow over here on the daily is going to be bearish with this supply being in control, so keep that in mind. And I do see that we do have some liquidity underneath the lows. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to wait for these lows to get taken out, and then of course on the 4-hour take a small long after you see the 4-hour correct change of character. I'm going to take a long until this supply, because from this supply you could trade down lower or trade up higher until that liquidity. But what's the move that we know? This move. So that's what I'm going to be trying to catch on the 4-hour. Ultimately, the best trade is not going to be for next week, I think, but the best trade, what you would want to wait for, something like this, connecting this supply, then trading down lower, creating a new supply order flow, swiping the high so that we become order flow bullish. And that's the point where you then want to look for longs, because then your daily order flow is also bullish and could look for those longs until those highs. So that's the best thing that you could look for. Of course, this is the daily time frame, so that's going to be taking a long time, maybe next or like the week after that, but I don't think this week. So I'm definitely just looking for a small long here on the 4-hour, maybe even the 1-hour or 50-minute even, trading towards this open supply. So what I'm waiting for again, this liquidity, then my confirmation on the lower time frame to take longs until this supply. Am I going to take a long setup after we swipe this low and then just a 50-minute fractal break? No, because we have a lot of room. We could move up higher from here, we could move up higher from here, we could even move up higher from here. So I'm definitely going to wait for a 4-hour change of character, and then I will scale in and look for the 50-minute or 1-hour to take any long setups towards this liquidity and the supply. So that's definitely a go-to here on AUD CAD. I'm even going to place my alert here on the liquidity, because this is definitely a nice setup that I want to be trading. Going over to my last pairs here, the yen. So on the weekly time frame, what do we see? Well, on the weekly time frame, this demand is going to be in control, and I'm just looking for longs. Also safe haven currency, so with the wars going on, we could trade up higher here on the yen basket. So we could trade up higher here. That's at least what I'm looking for. On the daily time frame, we were bullish, and this demand here is in control, so we could still trade up higher. So that's definitely nice that we could take out all of the highs over here, but we gotta be careful, because we could also first swipe the lows before moving up higher. So we gotta see on the 4-hour to see what we're going to do. So on the 4-hour, yes, the 4-hour is bullish, so we could already look for longs without swiping the low, but we do have an open demand zone over here, and some liquidity lows. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a swipe of the lows, stepping towards the demand and then trading up higher. So that's either what I'm waiting for, to see these lows swiped, then my 4-hour order flow to be bullish and then take long setups. Or we could already from this demand, for example, get a move up higher, swipe the order flow or change the order flow bullish, and then we could start to look for longs here. So on the yen, I'm definitely looking for longs here on the yen here, but I will need for my confirmation before moving up higher on the yen basket. So what could this mean for euro yen? I'm looking for shorts. So I'm either already looking to go short here after this liquidity grab to take a short in towards this demand, then trade up higher and then down lower, or we could just continue up higher in towards this supply and then trading down lower in towards this demand and maybe even lower towards the swing low. So those are my two options, either already a reaction now or move up higher in towards supply and then down lower. So on the daily time frame and the 4-hour, I'm going to see what we're going to do. So what do I see? First of all, yeah, we do still have some liquidity above these highs, which we could definitely take out before moving down lower. But it's kind of similar with the yen basket. I'm going to see if the yen basket is ready, then we could already take shorts here on euro yen. If not, and we take liquidity at the lows on the yen basket, and we could take liquidity at the highs here on euro yen before moving down lower. So on the 4-hour, you can see the order flow is currently bearish because this is your supply in control. So if I want to look for shorts, I would want another supply to be created, and then I'm going to look for shorts here on euro yen. Of course, what's going to be my target? This liquidity, this low here, because it's at the discount prices and we are swing bullish here, right? If we swipe the high, tap or grab that liquidity here, and then we get the change of character or fractal break, then I could also look for longs or shorts here until the liquidity is taken out. Now, am I going to look for any longs? It is possible if we see something like this, for example, trading in towards discount prices, grabbing liquidity, trading towards demand, and then you could take longs until this liquidity high. But that's going to be for the fundamentals, because at the moment fundamentally the yen basket is bullish, which should mean that the yen pairs XXX JPY, Euro JPY, GBP JPY, all of the yen pairs should trade down lower, right? So longs are not the best here in my opinion, at least not for this week, maybe for the week after that, but this week for me fundamentally the yen basket should trade up higher. So I'm looking for shorts on Euro Yen, GBP Yen and the next yen pairs. So either already from this supply after we see some more breaks into the downside, or if you grab liquidity, then one break is enough to take shorts. On GBP Yen, I'm definitely looking for this supply, which is more clear on the higher time frame. So on the higher time frame, we are bearish. We should trade down lower all the way until the lows, or at least that's what I'm looking for. We swept liquidity above this high, and then we swept it one more time. But as you can see here on the daily, we have an open imbalance candle. So I'm looking for one more time, one more swipe, and then I'm looking for the shorts to take out all of these lows. So that's what I'm looking for here on GBP Yen. On the 4-hour, it's also visible. This is going to be your swing high, which you want to break, and we have a supply zone open over here. So I'm looking for a swipe to take out all of the liquidity above these highs one more time, because what do people see? A liquidity swipe, then we start to break the lows, right? And then we could take those short setups. But this is now your demand in control, and your order flow is now still bullish. So you could still trade up higher, tap towards the supply, and from here I'm going to look for my shorts once the order flow switches bearish again. Now if we again switch bearish here, the order flow, you could already look for those shorts, because yes, we grab liquidity and it could already be valid to trade down lower. So that's definitely possible. Either we wait for this or we wait for this here on GBP Yen, but definitely shorts. USD Yen, we could trade down lower here on USD Yen. On the weekly time frame, we are inside this supply, which should push price down lower, and we also have some more liquidity to take before eventually trading towards this swing high. On the daily time frame, you're also currently inside supply, which should push price probably down lower, and I do also see a lot of liquidity here at these lows, which is definitely important to keep in mind, that we could see a swipe before moving up higher towards the supply, or just trade down lower eventually towards that weekly liquidity. On the 4-hour time frame, you're also 4-hour bearish. You have bearish order flow with this supply now being in control. So what do I see here? Some more liquidity over here, and that's something what I would like to see swiped. And then I'm going to look for my 4-hour fractal break. Boom, 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 fractal break towards the downside, creating supply, and that's when I take those short setups until those liquidity lows. So these are definitely nice for me next week. I'm definitely looking for these to trade. Going over to AUD Yen, like I said, AUD, NZD and CAD could trade down lower fundamentally. CAD, not so sure because of the oil prices that could boom up higher. So AUD and NZD definitely looking for those shorts in line with the Yen that should trade up higher. Fundamentally, this is looking great. So let's see if they are also technically looking nice to trade down lower. So we took a lot of liquidity at lows, so I was looking for liquidity at the highs, and we also did that. We took some internal liquidity here on the weekly time frame, so we also see a reaction from that, also from the supply, so we could just continue down lower. Again, I'm not a support and resistance point, but I do see that this is a strong level where we could trade down lower from. On the daily time frame, we are bearish, but I think we didn't yet tap the premium prices, or we did. Or actually, I have it already over here. So we did tap the premium prices. We grabbed liquidity above this high, so we could trade down lower. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And then you can also see this is your supply being in control. So, and we have liquidity here at the lows. So shorts here are definitely nice here on AUD Yen, probably also NZD Yen, but I will show that in a second. So again, we took liquidity, we now have supply, where we also took some more liquidity. We now also created a strong high because we got early sellers, swiped early sellers, and then we created this supply zone. So from this supply, what am I going to be looking for? Shorts, of course. So we do have some liquidity over here. So I want to see that getting swiped. For me, these were early sellers. And then we swipe them. And then what do I want to see? Of course, my 4-hour fractal to turn bearish again, because if we swipe this high, we also flip, or actually we are now 4-hour fractal bullish over here. So I would like to see my fractal getting bearish after swiping liquidity, and then we create a new supply zone. And that's where I want to look for shorts until all of the lows. So that's my play here on AUD Yen, definitely for next week. And going to look at NZD Yen, let's see. On the weekly time frame, same thing. We took liquidity at the lows, and then we take liquidity at the highs, and then we even swipe one more time. So shorts here definitely possible. On the daily time frame, I do see we have one more open supply and one more above that, and I also see that we have bullish order flow with the demands being in control. So for me, NZD Yen short, not going to be taking that, because the order flow is still bullish on the daily, and I'm not going to trade counter order flow. So I would like to see something like this in towards this point of interest, and then I could take some shorts here on the lower time frame, which is a 4-hour and lower for me. So again, point of interest is open, order flow is clearly bullish. So like technically, if we break the fractal high, you could look for longs, but fundamentally I'm not going to. So I'm not going to take any trades next week here on NZD Yen, except if we trade in towards this point of interest, then get a fractal break. Then I could look for shorts until the 50%, with this being the swing low, and over here the swing high, trading towards the 50%. Going over to Swiss Yen, I'm definitely looking for shorts here, 100%. So normally Swiss and Yen are safe havens, so they both should rise, right? So the Swiss should trade up higher and the Yen should trade up higher, which could mean that this pair is going to consolidate, but the Swiss could cut some rates, which could mean that this could drop, And when the Swiss drops and the yen trades up higher still, we could see a massive dump here on Swiss yen. So I have been calling these longs from this point to trade all the way towards the supply and this liquidity. Now that we did that, we could see a reaction to take liquidity at the lows, because what do we also see? Consolidation, manipulation, and now distribution towards the downside. So that's what I'm looking for here on Swiss yen. And this is the liquidity that I'm looking for to get taken out before taking any shorts. And then, of course, you see the dailies also switch bullish. So with this being your swing low and then somewhere over here being your swing high, right, somewhere around here, your liquidity, then your fractal, for example, you could trade out all of these lows trading towards discount prices. So going over to the 4-hour, over here we see all of these liquidity lows again. So definitely looking for shorts next week if we take out that daily liquidity, which I showed already. So what am I going to be looking for? Of course, you can see the order flow is bullish and we could just trade up higher. Am I going to take longs? No, I'm going to wait for shorts. So once we grab liquidity, I will wait for the order flow to switch bearish, creating supply, maybe multiple supply zones, and then I would like to take shorts until those lows, and your target could be all the way under these lows. So that's at least what I'm looking for Swiss yen. Definitely later on this week, because we will need some more confirmation, some multiple supply zones getting made before we could take those short setups. Then going over to CAD yen, I'm also looking for shorts. Why? Because again, the yen should trade up higher and the CAD should trade down lower. Now US oil, again, like I said multiple times, could push CAD up higher, but eventually I think CAD could trade down lower. So that's also what I'm waiting for. Now currently this demand is still in control and could push price back up higher to take out liquidity above all of these highs. But we still have a monthly demand open. I'm going to show that. We didn't yet tap this demand. It's still perfectly open. So on the weekly time frame, yes, we grab liquidity near the lows and we could trade up higher because we have bullish order flow, but that could be a trap on the higher time frame to see one more swipe and then trading up higher. Keep that in mind. So definitely this is also your daily low and your daily bearish, so we should get a break of structure at the low. I do see that we have an open supply and some more liquidity, so I'm going to be waiting for that to get hit, and from here I'm definitely looking for shorts to take some liquidity at the lows. It could be, for example, something like this, just this little small move on the 50-minute or 1 hour, because from here we could then trade up higher or trade down lower. Like I said multiple times, this is then what you want to be trading, to be 100% sure or at least have the highest probability setup. So on the 4-hour, what does this look like? You can see this is going to be your supply zone. So what would this look like? Boom, 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 breaking the fractal and then trading down lower. And then let's say this is your swing high, this is your swing low, and this is possibly going to be your swing high around that point. You would want to trade towards the discount prices, and then you could take this setup, the short, and then either trading up higher from here or trading down lower, but that is something you will need to see for next week probably, or later on this week, and after we see confirmation, right? So if you see this, then you could see confirmation breaking or creating demand zones, then you could take more longs. But eventually, like I said, I would like to take short setups here on CAD yen. So if we start to break the order flow down lower and down lower, you could also take some more short setups. But I think this is my go-to move for next week on CAD yen. Looking for Euro GBP. Over the long term, I'm looking for shorts here, because what happened, or at least what's happening, we have an open demand where I want to trade towards. We grabbed a lot of liquidity above the high, so I would like to see liquidity at the lows get taken out. On the daily time frame, you can also see after that liquidity grab, we created a supply zone. Now we grab some more liquidity. We could trade down lower now and take liquidity at these lows and trade towards this open demand. But on the 4-hour, you can also see that we do have another supply zone open over here with some more liquidity as well open. So we could also see something like this. boom, and then from here you want to take shorts after, of course, the order flow switch once again. But you could also see already shorts, but the price action here on Euro GBP is definitely not nice. You see multiple impulses, so I'm going to be waiting for a whole lot more confirmation and more development on this pair, because yes, we have liquidity, but I would like to see maybe one more swipe, then down lower, creating supply before taking any short setups, because there's no supply over here, only over here. So either we trade all the way towards the supply before taking shorts, or what could also happen, we create our own supply by swiping the high, then the low, creating supply, and then we could trade down lower. So that's what I'm waiting for Euro GBP. And if this does not happen, then I'm not going to take any trade here on Euro GBP. So I hope you guys liked my outlook, and let's see if we can get some trades. See you guys next week. Ciao.